Sasha Wiley. Sasha is a teacher in Vancouver, and she was arrested and brutally assaulted by police officers during the last march. We have Greg Williams, who was arrested as well. You guys can speak to him on the charges and conditions based on that priority arrest.
Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Sasha Wiley Shaw, which is SASHAWILEY-SHAW. I'm a public school teacher. I teach in adult education at the Roberts Education Centre in the West End, and I've been teaching there for 6 years. And I'm here today to talk about my arrest on last Wednesday, the 27th of June. I think the first thing I'd like to say is about what I learned on Wednesday night. And what I learned on Wednesday night is that in the city of Vancouver, it's currently not safe to exercise your fundamental freedoms to expression, assembly, and association, no matter what your conduct is. I've participated in various different political associations and rallies and marches and things in Vancouver since my childhood. And I've always had the belief that if I conducted myself, respectfully, safely, non-violently, that I would be met with the same treatment. And I learned on Wednesday night that that is absolutely not the case. I, on Wednesday evening, attended a Casseroles solidarity demonstration at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and I had brought with me printouts of sections 1 and 2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Because I had heard about the arrests that had happened on Friday that were arbitrary arrests of people who were peacefully expressing themselves politically. And I thought at the demonstration we could do some education about charter rights and the way they were being violated. So I was encouraging people to wear their charter rights. I'll show you. So many of us were wearing these, and in fact this is the one I was wearing when I was arrested, taped to the chest of my blue dress. And so we were at the art gallery, and there were at least as many Vancouver police officers there as there were those of us attending the demonstration. One of them approached us and gave us some directions that seemed to me to be of the intent to intimidate us, telling us that if we did a litany of things, entered a flow of traffic or stopped in an intersection or any of these things, that we would be arrested. And because of the number of police officers, we decided as a group that we would try and get the badge numbers and names of the officers who were on the site of the Vancouver Art Gallery. And so proceeded to approach a police officer and attempt to do so. And 2 arrests followed for people who did absolutely nothing wrong. And we were outraged, and I saw this as further violation of people's fundamental freedoms, and so joined the march down here to the jail, where we held a jail solidarity rally. I learned while I was in jail how important it is for your mental well-being to know that you have friends outside waiting for you. I think that's, for me, a big part of why I came to the jail solidarity rally, but also because there's the goal of raising awareness and bringing public attention to the fact that people have been arrested without cause for political expression. And so we were demonstrating in the crosswalk just around the corner here that runs between the jail and the police station, and banging pots and pans and having occasional chants or the mic checks that are associated with Occupy Wall Street that you're probably familiar with. And that's where I was arrested for no reason. I obeyed every directive police gave me when they were stopping us from marching in the crosswalk to let, for example, a bus or something through. I obeyed that directive. Certainly not someone who seeks confrontation. For most of the time we were demonstrating in the crosswalk, the police had traffic up that street blocked. And then at one point all the police officers left and went back inside the police station, and the traffic began approaching us. And we were still demonstrating in the crosswalk, so the traffic was stopped, and a large burgundy SUV with Idaho license plates kind of came to the front of the crowd in the far lane and was behaving quite aggressively, honking his horn and kind of edging towards protesters who were walking back and forth in the crosswalk. So I was of course concerned about the safety of my friends and fellow protesters who were there with me, and just calmly walked in front of the vehicle and stood there for a minute to, I hoped, calmly express, you're not going to get through right now. People are using this space for political expression, so just, be calm and hang tight. And the driver inched towards me, and other people were, standing and walking right around where I was. And at some point got out of his vehicle and went to the door of the police station. Nobody seemed to come out, and went back into his vehicle, and then backed up and drove aggressively toward me as though he were going to run me over. At that point, a bunch of the other demonstrators kind of came right to where that was happening and were yelling at the driver of the vehicle and reacting to the very scary thing that had just happened. And so the vehicle, because of the number of people, backed down to the end of the block, and that was the point at which the officers came streaming out of the Vancouver police station again. When I saw them, I presumed they were coming to block traffic again because they saw that it was, that the driver was being aggressive and it was potentially a danger to those of us who were expressing ourselves politically and peacefully. And instead I was encircled and my arms were grabbed. I can't even tell you how many police officers were around me. I felt like I was in a sea of them. I know one had my left arm and one had my right arm, and they put them behind my back and told me I was being arrested. I asked them why I was being arrested and they wouldn't respond or tell me anything. And essentially when you're grabbed by police officers of that size, and there's that many of them, I had really no physical control over my body. I was walking with them to the door of the jail, proceeding to ask them loudly why I was being arrested, and they wouldn't tell me a single thing. You can see on the YouTube footage that's out there of my arrest. If you search for the Vancouver Casserole protests on Wednesday, June 27th, you can see the footage of my arrest. I'm 2 feet from the jail door and you can hear me say to the officers still, could you please tell me why I'm being arrested? And they won't answer me. And at that point, I was taken through the door of the jail, and there was, a crush of bodies because my friends and fellow protesters were rushing to my defense. There'd been no reason given for my arrest, and they too were asking why I was being arrested. And in the crush of bodies, as I was dragged through the door, my foot got caught in the jail door, and you can see it's all bruised and abraded. And so because of that, I kind of fell over, and I was continuing to ask the officers why I was being arrested, and at that point they started yelling at me to stop resisting arrest. As though surrounded by officers of that size, I would find it reasonable or think that I might be successful in struggling away from them. I clearly was not resisting. I was asking why I was being arrested. I was thrown violently down to the cement floor of the loading bay of the Vancouver jail, where then 2 officers were on top of me. One put my right arm behind my back and was pressing me into the ground with such force that it caused abrasion on the cement to my shoulder. You can see the bruising and swelling of my knee from the force of which that officer was pressing me to the ground while putting my left arm behind my back. And then the officer on my right, and both of them were staying behind me, so I couldn't see, who they were. I didn't even really know how many officers were behind me, but I could definitely feel the 2 of them pulling on me. The one on the right had his knee in my right lower back and was repeatedly thrusting it into my lower back while wrenching my right arm. I presumed he was trying to put it behind my back, but he was sitting there, so my arm couldn't have been put behind my back, and he was levering it against his leg, and that's the sprain in my wrist, and my pain all the way up through my arm and all the way down through my right side. And they were continuing to tell me to stop resisting when I wasn't even moving and was laying face down on the concrete. I was continuing to ask them why I was being arrested. They still hadn't told me. And at one point I said, I'm not resisting, and they said, well then stop talking, as though asking why I'd been arrested constituted resisting arrest. So I was treated very roughly, and I was arrested for absolutely no reason, and I know this because the police released me without charge. When they had arrested me, they claimed that it was because I had spit on a vehicle and that constituted vandalism. First of all, if anyone thinks it's reasonable to me spitting with that kind of force and violence, that's just disgusting. But also, I'm a public school teacher and generally a polite person, not someone who spits on things. I certainly didn't spit on any vehicles or do anything like that whatsoever, and I think the police know that because they dropped that charge. So ultimately, all I was given was a ticket for loitering. This is I've got the original at home, but this is a copy of the ticket they gave me. So this is the police violence and excessive force I endured for what they claim is loitering, a bylaw infraction. So that's like, you know, something like a parking ticket. If you can imagine getting a parking ticket and being treated that way, that's how I was treated. Other people were then arrested and they were charged. And what they had done was come to my defense and try and support me in finding out why I was being arrested. And that's essentially what they were charged for. So their arrests were as capricious, unnecessary, and arbitrary as mine. A dear friend of mine was shoved to the ground and her wrist was broken because she rushed to my side and was trying to ask the officers why I was being arrested. And I'm just so shocked and disgusted by the treatment we received, and to know that this fits in a larger political context, that this was not just me. You know, we were aware that a Vancouver police officer by the name of Ken Athen had just been to Montreal and received training there. And it seems to me this is clearly training on how to quash political dissent and expression. I think they had a tactic that they used on Wednesday night, and I think we saw it both at the art gallery and here. At the art gallery, police approached someone who had at one point been under an undertaking to not come downtown, but had that undertaking overturned, and were behaving aggressive and forceful with her, and then they proceeded to arrest those who reacted to the way police were treating her and tried to come to her defense. And the same thing happened to me here. I believe it's a deliberate targeting of women who are involved in organizing and who are vocal in these protests. I had been, you know, mic checking and reading from the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and things of that nature. I'd been quite vocal in the protest, and I was, you know, surrounded and taken away, and those who came to my defense were arrested. It's a disgusting tactic. It's a sexist and gendered tactic to, you know, try and go for women who aren't as physically strong, and then assault and arrest those who try and come to our defense. I've never in my life been afraid of police before, but we came around the corner in the vehicle here this morning and I began shaking and felt nauseous because of the fear I have, because of the trauma I endured. I've only ever been here to the provincial court at 222 Main Street before to bring my students on field trips. And now because of the physical fear reaction I have because of my trauma, I'm not sure how I'll be able to do that again. And I think I'm going to be living with a level of fear and stress and trauma as a result of this, for doing absolutely nothing unlawful, absolutely nothing unsafe. And I'm shocked and appalled that the Vancouver Police Department think this is acceptable conduct.
Next we have Greg Williams.
Can everybody hear me over the traffic?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Gregory Williams, and I have been, and 2 nights ago I was arrested, and I'm currently being charged with obstructing injustice, is I believe what the charge was, which I think sort of is a defining feature of this political movement. I want to start off by acknowledging that this press conference is taking place on unceded Coast Salish territories, and that the traditional caregivers of this land are the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish peoples. I think that is extremely relevant information given what we're talking about today. We're talking about police, we're talking about police violence, and I just want to thank everybody who's in the media for coming out to this and for wanting to pay attention. And I would like to encourage all of you to not just think about these arrests in isolation. This is about the criminalization of dissent, but this is also about police. We're standing right outside the provincial courts in the most policed neighborhood in Vancouver, one of the most policed neighborhoods in Canada, and that's the downtown east side. It is extremely important to note that the violence against us and our comrades, the violence in particular, as Sasha pointed out, the violence against women, is absolutely horrific. It's also important to note that equally horrific, sometimes even more horrific violence takes place in this neighborhood on a day-to-day basis. This is doubly occupied land. This is land that is occupied by Canada as a colonial racist institution. This is also a low-income neighborhood that is currently under a military occupation by the police, where people are subjected to criminalization, to random arrests. If you talk to a lot of people on the streets here, in fact, we were actually, if we were just talking to just one gentleman here who was just telling us his story, and stories like the ones that we're telling you are not all that uncommon. So I'd just like to encourage all of you who are members of the press to actually investigate that. So for example, as Sasha mentioned, the officers that we have been talking about had recently been to Montreal in order to train to put down student protesters. Yet we cannot get those same officers to make a single phone call from the VPD to the RCMP in order to investigate the kidnapping and murders of women, and particularly of women of color, here in the downtown East Side. So that's, I think, the most important lesson to draw from this. As for my arrest, as I mentioned, my charge is obstructing injustice. I can't tell you much about what happened at the demonstration, largely because I was arrested within 15 minutes of the demonstration getting started. We had recently received a speech from the police on how if we put one toe out of line, if we blocked traffic, if we took an intersection. By the way, I would just like to note that these are all very standard things to do in a street demonstration. Blocking intersections in order to talk to the public, make a display, is completely normal in Vancouver's political culture, but if we did any of these things, that we would be arrested. So first point is the police went into this with an intention to arrest. Second point is that when we, as a precautionary measure, because we thought that there might well be arrests, we went out and we started to collect badge numbers. And Dayla might be able to tell you more about this, but my information says that there were 42. Oh, the number's gone up since I last heard. 42 independent badge numbers. So 42 police to police a demonstration that started out with between 10 and 20 people.